Ayanna Blake had just transferred to Meadow Ridge High. She came from a part of the city most of these kids only whispered about. A place where you learned fast that talking back could get you jumped and looking soft could get you hurt. She was a fighter. But the bullies didn't see that. They saw a quiet black girl, a target for their cruel games, so they came at her, escalating the bullying every day. Then one afternoon, they came with scissors and a plan to get a reaction. Laughter followed. Someone said it was just a joke. The teacher looked away. The room went still, but Ayanna didn't. They thought she was soft. They thought she'd take it. They were wrong. The sun was too bright for a Monday, washing out the sky in a pale, indifferent blue that made the town feel sterile, untouched. Ayanna Blake sat in the back seat of her mother's Honda, watching rows of identical houses slide past the window, each one with trimmed hedges and polished SUVs. Her mother hadn't said much during the drive, and Ayanna hadn't expected her to. It had been that way for months. As they pulled into the school's circular front lot, the building loomed clean and sharp with banners reading, "Excellence through Community." Her mother adjusted the rear-view mirror, checked her lipstick, and muttered something that sounded like, "You'll be fine." No hug, no good luck, just a nod at the school. Ayanna stepped out without a word. She stood there staring at the rows of students streaming through the front doors. Backpacks slung carelessly, phones glowing in their hands, laughter echoing like they'd all known each other since kindergarten. No one looked her way, and yet she could feel it, the sideways glances, the whisper that rippled through the air. She adjusted the strap on her backpack, lifted her chin just a little, and walked through the front entrance like it didn't matter. The first thing she noticed was how clean it all smelled. Not the bleach and metal kind of clean she was used to, but a soft lemon-scented air that felt curated. The hallways were wide, the lockers painted in two-tone blue, and the floors polished to a shine. It was a different world here. Her homeroom teacher, Miss Kendricks, greeted her with a tone just a little too sweet to be real. "Welcome, Ayanna. I've heard we've got a strong student joining us." There was something about the way she said strong that made Ayanna want to leave the room. She took the seat assigned to her in the back corner without comment. When lunch came, Ayanna carried her tray through the cafeteria like she was crossing open ground in enemy territory. She spotted an empty spot near the edge of the room and made her way there only to find someone sliding into it seconds before she reached it. She moved again, finally settling at a lone seat near the exit, eating in silence. It was there that she saw them for the first time. Austin Reddle and his two shadows, Kyle and Brandon. They walked like they owned something. When Austin's gaze landed on Ayanna, there was a flash of recognition. Not the kind that said, "I know you," but the kind that said, "I've seen your type before." His smile was thin, teeth too perfect, and he nudged Brandon, who let out a low, amused whistle. She didn't look away. She just stared back, blank and unblinking, until they moved on. The next day, it started small. Someone bumped her shoulder harder than necessary in the hallway. Someone else knocked her pencil off her desk with a casual flick. A snicker here, a whispered name there. Ghetto, she got attitude. Thinks she's tough. Ayanna said nothing. She kept her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes on the clock. She'd promised herself no fights. Not here, not again. But there was something in the air that told her this wasn't going to stop. Not until someone made it stop. By the second week, the message had begun to form. Silent, but unmistakable. "You don't fit here." In chemistry class, someone behind her snorted after she answered a question correctly, followed by a whisper just loud enough to travel. Must have learned that in Hood school. Kyle, the one who'd muttered it, leaned toward Brandon and chuckled. "Straight out of Compton. Over here solving equations." Brandon laughed. "Yo, she probably got that answer trading crack for calculators." Ayanna heard every word, but she didn't flinch. She'd learned early that silence, when held just right, could be heavier than any insult. By gym class, the game had escalated. During basketball drills, Kyle shoved past her, throwing a shoulder hard enough to send her stumbling. "Watch it, Queen Latifah." He sneered as he passed. Ayanna caught herself without falling, straightened slowly. "That's not even clever," she said, voice low, measured, not angry, dismissive. "You're not funny. Just loud." It was the first time she'd said anything back, and it cracked the air like glass. After class, Austin fell and stepped beside her. "You got a little mouth on you," he said casually. "You got a lot of nothing coming out of yours." He laughed softly. "I see what this is. New girl trying to prove something." I'm not trying, she said. I straight ahead. And I'm not new. Just relocated. Austin clicked his tongue. Where from? She didn't answer. He leaned in a little. But it wasn't anywhere like this. This time she looked at him. Not even close. Austin's smile flickered. All right, tough girl. Let's see how long that fire lasts. The next morning, she opened her locker to find it stuffed with torn-up paper. Black Sharpie across the torn edges. Go back. Nobody wants you here. She stood there, motionless, papers fluttering at her feet. She crouched down, gathered the papers, stuffed them deep into her backpack, and closed the locker with a soft, deliberate click. She didn't report it. Not yet. Later that afternoon, as she waited for the bus, a voice broke through the quiet. You doing all right here? She turned to see Principal Hughes. He was tall, clean-cut, with skin as dark as her father's, and eyes that seemed to carry entire stories. I'm good. His gaze held hers. You sure? You're not invisible. I never said I was, she replied. He smiled faintly. No, you didn't. But I've seen that look before. What look is that? The one that says, I know exactly how far I can be pushed before someone learns they picked the wrong one. Ayana's lips twitched slightly. If anything crosses the line, he said, and you want it documented, you come to me. I'll handle it the right way. What's the right way? The way they don't expect. It happened on a Wednesday during that slow stretch of the week where the school's rhythm dragged. Ayana felt it the moment she walked through the front doors. She caught them watching her early that day. First in the hallway near her locker, where Austin leaned against the metal. Then during third period when Brandon kept turning halfway in his seat, whispering to Kyle, both of them smirking. By fourth period, Ayana had already started counting the ways they were circling her without touching. It was during sixth period art class that it finally happened. The teacher, Ms. Henley, was in the corner talking with a student while others chatted softly or stared blankly at their drawings. Ayana was seated near the back, her pencil tracing soft lines on the blank page in front of her. She didn't notice Brandon move behind her. She didn't hear the blade. It happened fast. There was the faint sound of scissors opening and closing, the whisper of hair being sliced, and then the sharp tug near her scalp that made her freeze. She reached up slowly. Her hand came away with frayed ends. Her braid had been cut. Behind her, Brandon was laughing. Yo! Oh my God! Kyle gasped. Did you just, dude, that's messed up. Brandon held up the severed braid like it was a trophy. I thought she might want to lighten up the load. This stuff's heavy, right? Ayana didn't turn around. She stared at the braid in her hand, unmoving. Austin's voice came from across the room. Damn, I didn't think you'd actually do it. More laughter followed. Ayana still hadn't moved. Then she stood. The chair scraped slowly against the floor. She didn't speak. She didn't scream. She simply rose from her seat, turned to face him, and looked down at the braid in his hand. Brandon blinked. Relax, he said, suddenly unsure. It's not like it was real or anything. Ayana stared at him. You think that makes it better? Kyle stepped forward quickly. Look, no one's trying to hurt feelings. It's just hair, right? Austin leaned back and crossed his arms. I mean, you make it a statement. You wear it like armor. People are going to test it. That's just how it goes. Ayana looked at him now, her voice calm. Too calm. You think this is about hair? Austin smirked. Isn't it? She took one step forward, then another. You don't get to touch me. You don't get to take something from me and call it a joke. Brandon held up his hands. Okay, just calm down. But Ayana wasn't angry. Not in the way they expected. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't shaking. She was quiet, controlled, watching. Her fist connected before he finished. There was no hesitation, just a brutal sudden snap of her shoulder and a clean right hook that landed square against his cheekbone. The sound was sharp and ugly, followed by the dull thud of his body hitting the art table. Brandon dropped, stunned, clutching his face as blood poured from his nose. Kyle lunged toward her, but she shifted sideways and grabbed his arm mid-swing, twisting his wrist back and slamming his elbow down across the edge of the table. He shrieked, buckled, then dropped. Austin moved next, hands lifted. All right, back up. You made your point. Ayana didn't blink. No, she said, her voice colder than steel. You don't get to talk. Austin took a slow step back, the arrogance gone. Ms. Henley finally snapped out of it, reaching for the intercom. We need assistance in room 316 right now. Ayana stood in the center of the wreckage. She wasn't breathing hard. She wasn't flushed or panicked. She was still. She picked up the braid, held it in her hands, then turned and walked out. She moved down the corridor like she already knew where she'd be taken. By the time the assistant principal rounded the corner with 2 campus officers, she was waiting. She didn't resist as they walked her toward the main office. Inside the principal's office, Darnell Hughes stood waiting. He dismissed the security staff with a brief nod. "Close the door," he said. "Sit down, Ayanna." She did. Principal Hughes didn't look at the window. His gaze stayed on her. "I read the report from the art teacher. She said, you attacked 3 students. One's got a broken nose. Another's being sent for x-rays on his arm." Ayanna didn't respond. "Let me ask you again. What?" Ayanna's voice came softer, more tired than angry. "They cut my hair." He nodded. "I figured that's what it was. I watched the security feed from the hallway after you walked out. You didn't run. You didn't resist. You waited. That's not the kind of reaction that comes from someone who just snapped." Her eyes flicked up now, meeting his. "Most people," he continued, "when they hear a black girl fought 3 white boys and sent 2 of them to the nurse, they think one thing. They think violence. They think rage. They think threat." "I know," she said, her voice flat. "They always do. But when I hear it," he said, "I start asking what happened before the fight. I ask what didn't get recorded, what got laughed off, what teachers missed or ignored." "I didn't want to fight," she said. "I wanted to finish the day, go home, breathe. That's all." "Then why didn't you walk away?" She looked at him. "Because I've walked away 100 times. Because I've ignored the comments, the little things, the accidents. Because I sat still and didn't react, and it only made them push harder. Laugh louder. Get bolder." She opened her palm, showing him the frayed end of the braid. "And then they took this." Principal Hughes stared at the braid. "It wasn't just hair." "No," she said. "It never is." "I have to suspend you," he said. 3 days out of school." "I figured," she replied. "But I'm not expelling you," he added quickly. "They're going to push for that. Parents, board members, maybe even the district. They're going to say you're a danger, that you need to be removed. And when they do," he said, "I'm going to ask for the footage from inside that classroom. I'm going to file a report of my own. I'm going to start asking questions that make people uncomfortable." She watched him carefully. "Why?" "Because I've spent my whole life walking the line between doing the job they gave me and doing the job that matters. And today, I've decided those 2 things don't have to be different anymore." He reached into his drawer and pulled out a plain manila envelope. "Inside is your suspension paperwork. You'll sign it. I'll file it and you'll go home." She took the envelope. "But that's not the end of this," he said. "You understand me?" She nodded once slowly. "You've been fighting alone since the first day you walked in here," he said. "You don't have to anymore." Her grip loosened on the braid slightly. "Okay." The morning after the incident, the school parking lot filled earlier than usual. Black SUVs and polished BMWs arrived. They were the kind of parents who didn't ask questions. They arrived expecting explanations, apologies, and consequences. Principal Hughes stood watching the storm gather. When he stepped into the conference room, they were already standing. All 3. Fathers, all 3 mothers. Expensive coats, polished watches. They looked at him the way corporate executives look at a man they've already decided is replaceable. "Let's skip the pleasantries," one said. "My son came home with a busted nose and a black eye. You want to explain to me why the girl who did it isn't in a holding cell?" "She was suspended," Hughes replied evenly. 3 days out of school, standard protocol." "That wasn't an altercation," the blonde woman snapped. "It was a savage attack." "No," Hughes said calmly. "It was a response." The room tensed. "You're defending her." "I'm stating the facts," Hughes said. "Your son's approached a student during class, used a pair of scissors to cut her hair without her consent, and then publicly mocked her afterward. That's assault. That's humiliation. That's emotional violence. And it provoked a physical response." "You don't understand what you're saying," the blonde woman hissed. "You're trying to justify violence against white students." "No," Hughes said, his tone sharpening. "I'm trying to justify truth." One of the men stepped closer. "We've been generous with this school. I sit on the school board. My firm sponsors your athletics department. And now my son is afraid to come to school because you're allowing some girl with a chip on her shoulder to. I'm allowing her to attend a school where she was enrolled, where she has every right to be, and where she should have been protected from the moment she arrived." Hughes interrupted. "You're not angry because your sons were attacked. You're angry because someone fought back and you weren't prepared for what that looked like. One of the mothers shook her head slowly. You realize this is going to escalate, don't you? We're not going to let this go. Not after the media gets wind of it. I'm counting on it, Hughes said simply. They blinked, confused. Because once the media gets wind of it, they'll also get the footage of 3 boys surrounding a girl in class, cutting her hair, laughing, threatening. Once the media sees that tape, I'm willing to bet the public will understand why that girl defended herself. You wouldn't, one of them growled. I already have, he replied. The footage is being reviewed by the district superintendent as we speak. So, if you're here to file complaints, by all means, I'll add them to the documentation. But if you're here to intimidate me, you're wasting your time. You'll lose your job over this. Hughes smiled faintly. If I do, it'll be doing the right thing. They gathered their coats in silence. The blonde mother paused at the door. You've made a serious mistake. Hughes looked back at her. No, ma'am, he said quietly. I've made a choice. The tension didn't fade. The emails started that afternoon, full of sharp language and veiled threats. Principal Hughes read every line with quiet surgical focus. He printed them all, filed them by name. He responded only when he had to, and always included a copy of the video timestamp. A local journalist, Lena Mercer, reached out directly to Hughes, then to Ayanna. She asked Ayanna for an interview. Ayanna agreed. When Ayanna sat across from the camera, Lena pressed record and said, "Say only what you want. No more, no less." Ayanna didn't talk about the fight. She talked about being watched, about being mocked, about the moment she sat in the bathroom stall after her braid was cut, staring at the broken strands in her hand. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. When Lena asked her what she hoped would happen now, she said simply, I want the truth to stop being quiet. The interview aired that weekend. It wasn't viral. It wasn't sensational, but it was clear. By Monday, parents were calling the school not to complain, but to ask questions. A former teacher commented anonymously, admitting she'd once filed a report about Brandon harassing a Somali student and was told to document it and move on. Miss Chandler, the English teacher, shared the interview publicly with a single line, "This isn't new. This is just finally visible." By Wednesday, the superintendent scheduled a mandatory meeting. By Friday, the school board issued a statement calling for a third-party review by the end of the following week. The district released its first findings. We have confirmed that multiple prior complaints involving the same group of students were not investigated appropriately or escalated through the proper channels. Corrective action will be taken. That single sentence detonated. The moment Austin threw the fork, the mocking laughter, the taunt, the silence, the stare, it spread fast. A sophomore girl posted a long thread detailing how Kyle had harassed her. She had saved the email. She posted screenshots. A former student commented, "That's the same boy who followed me to my car 3 times and was never written up." That Thursday, Ayanna and Principal Hughes were both invited to speak at a district hearing. She didn't want to go at first, but Hughes said, sometimes they don't change because of a speech. Sometimes they change because they run out of ways to lie. The hearing was in a narrow district building. The room was full. Ayanna stood at the front in a plain black sweater. No jewelry, no frills, just her. She told them what had happened. And when someone from the board asked, "Do you feel that justice has been served for you?" she answered, "I don't need justice to come quickly. I need it to come fully and not just for me." A formal letter of disciplinary action was issued against Brandon, Kyle, and Austin. By Friday, Brandon had withdrawn from the school. Kyle's parents had requested a transfer. Austin remained, but he walked with his head down now. The school felt different now, not because the building had changed, but because the illusion around it had cracked. At IT was during 5th period on a Wednesday that Principal Hughes asked to see her again. "I got a call this morning," he said, "from the district superintendent. They're going to issue a formal apology to you in writing publicly, and they're offering you the chance to speak at the press conference." She sat with that for a moment. "What happens if I don't?" "They'll still apologize," he said. "They'll still update the policy, but it'll fade sooner or later." She nodded slowly. "And if I do speak, then it doesn't fade. Then it's documented in your voice." "I'll speak," she said finally, but there was one last conversation she needed to have. She found Austin after school in the back lot. He was leaning against his car. When he looked up, the fear was instant. "I'm not here to fight," she said quietly. She stood in front of him. "You ever think about why you did it?" His brow furrowed. Did what? Cut my hair. Said what you said. Laughed when they did it. What was it supposed to be? He swallowed hard. It was a joke. She nodded slowly. You thought. You were allowed. You thought nothing would happen, that I'd take it, that someone like me didn't have a right to dignity. Austin said nothing. I don't need an apology, she added. I just wanted you to understand something. You didn't break me, she said. You revealed yourself. And with that, she turned and walked away. The press conference was held in the auditorium. Camera crews arrived early. The superintendent went first, reading from a printed statement. She acknowledged the incidents, expressed regret, thanked Ayanna for her courage. Then Hughes stepped forward to introduce Ayanna. She didn't ask for a podium. She didn't ask for cameras, but she earned them. Ayanna walked out slowly. She wore no makeup, no bright colors, just a black blazer over a white blouse. When she finally spoke, her voice wasn't loud. My name is Ayanna Blake. I didn't come here to talk about what happened to me. That part's already been covered. What I came here to do today is tell you what that moment meant and what it didn't. It didn't mean I was violent. It didn't mean I was unstable. It meant I was tired. Tired of being humiliated. Tired of pretending silence was strength. They cut my hair, but they didn't break me. They laughed, but they didn't win. And when I stood up, I didn't stand for myself. I stood for every student who's been told they were too much, too loud, too angry, too black. I stood because nobody else would. She leaned forward slightly. I don't want your pity. I don't want to be your symbol. What I want is accountability that doesn't wait until someone's hurt. What I want is protection that doesn't depend on headlines. What I want is a school where dignity isn't something you earn by staying quiet, but something you're given because you're human. I've been asked a lot what I want now, what justice looks like, and I don't know that I have one answer. But I'll tell you what I don't want. I don't want apologies with no action. I don't want promises that fade in a week. And I don't want to be the only one. She exhaled slowly. This place can be better if it chooses to be. She stepped back from the mic. There was no applause at first, just silence. Then one hand, then another. Then the room rose with a deep, measured respect. Ayanna walked off the stage. She was done being invisible. The days that followed were quiet in a way that felt different. The district moved quickly. Policy updates were drafted, including mandatory training on racial bias and student dignity. An anonymous reporting platform was introduced. The school board's final report included a rare statement of failure. It named the pattern. It acknowledged the harm. Austin transferred 2 weeks later. No announcement, just an absence, but it wasn't just about them. Ayanna's victory wasn't in their punishment. It was in her presence. One afternoon, a younger girl stopped her in the hallway. You're Ayanna, right? She asked. Ayanna paused. Yeah. The girl nodded. Thanks for what you did. They used to mess with my cousin. They don't anymore. Ayanna smiled. Small, tired, but reeled home. Her mother sat with her one evening. She didn't say much, just placed a cup of tea in front of her and said, We're proud. Later that week, Ayanna returned to the boxing gym where her cousin Darius still trained. He tossed her a pair of gloves. You ready? She stepped into the ring. I never stopped. Between rounds, Darius said, You didn't swing too soon. You waited. Then you finished. Ayanna nodded. And now, he asked. She looked past him. Now I teach someone else how. He smiled. You finally understand. The last weeks of the semester passed in a slow drift. Ayanna moved through the halls without tension in her shoulders, without scanning for the next confrontation. She had stopped carrying her notebook, not because she didn't need it anymore, but because others had started to take up the work. A group of students had formed an accountability committee. Informal, unofficial, but present. One afternoon near the end of the year, she passed Principal Hughes's office. You think they'll keep it going? She asked. He looked up. Some will, he said, and the rest will adjust. She nodded. That enough for you? It's enough to begin, she replied. On the final week of school, she returned to the same spot in the cafeteria where it had all begun. She didn't sit in the shadows this time. She sat near the center. A new student, a girl with a shy voice and dark eyes, passed her. Ayanna caught her gaze, then gestured. You can sit here, she said. The girl paused, surprised. Then Saturday later that afternoon, as students filed out for summer break, she passed the glass doors and paused beneath the school's motto, Excellence through Community. For the first time, it didn't feel ironic. She walked home slowly that day. That night, she found the old braid tucked between journal pages. She held it for a long moment, not with pain, but with reverence. Then she placed it gently in a box and set it on the highest shelf in her closet, not to forget, but to remember who she'd become after they tried to take something from her. She didn't need a monument. She was one.